Putin does not know where Sweden's submarines are, and that's the problem. The Baltic Sea is shallow, crowded, saturated with sensors, and yet, in a crisis, Russia cannot reliably locate the very platforms that could shut down its fleet. Sweden didn't just join NATO, it turned the Baltic into an underwater uncertainty zone. And Moscow now has to plan around something it cannot see, risk it cannot measure. In practice, it is one of the most difficult seas on Earth to track a quiet submarine, because the Baltic does not behave like open ocean. It averages roughly 60 meters in depth. That is shallow by submarine standards. Sound behaves unpredictably in confined water. Salinity layers distort sonar returns. Temperature gradients bend acoustic paths. Civilian shipping, ferries, and fishing traffic create constant acoustic clutter. Thousands of islands and archipelagos create natural acoustic shadow zones. In deep ocean, submarines hide in space. In the Baltic, they hide in complexity. And Sweden built its undersea force specifically for this complexity, not for global patrol prestige, not for distant expeditionary dominance, but for denial, for ambiguity, for discomfort. Sweden's Gotland-class submarines are small diesel-electric boats equipped with Stirling air-independent propulsion. Air-independent propulsion allows them to remain submerged for extended periods without snorkeling. No snorkeling means no mast breaking the surface, no diesel exhaust plume, no regular exposure cycle that radar and infrared systems can pattern. In a shallow, cluttered sea where detection windows are already narrow, that matters. The upcoming A-26 Blekinge-class continues that philosophy. Compact profile, extreme acoustic discipline, designed specifically for operations in confined waters, built around staying invisible longer than the opponent expects. In this environment, size is not dominance, silence is. If you are enjoying this video, hit that like and subscribe button right now. Before 2024, Sweden was militarily non-aligned. Its submarines existed outside NATO's integrated operational structure. Russia still had to account for them, but the political geometry of the Baltic remained fluid. There was space between blocks. There was ambiguity in alignment. Then Sweden joined NATO. That decision did not change the depth of the sea. It changed the map around it. Almost the entire Baltic coastline is now NATO territory. Norway to the north, Denmark at the Straits, Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states along the southern and eastern arc. Finland sealing the north. Only Kaliningrad and the St. Petersburg region remain outside that alignment. The water did not shrink, but Russia's maneuver space did. And beneath that waterline, the most unpredictable element is not a surface fleet. It is something that does not need to surface at all. Recent years have seen Russian naval units operating more frequently in the Baltic. Swedish officials have publicly stated that encounters with Russian submarines now occur on an almost weekly basis. Surface vessels, aircraft, and coastal assets monitor and shadow these movements. In October 2025, when a Russian Project 636.3 Kilo-class submarine entered the Baltic via the Danish Straits, Swedish JS-39 Gripen fighters and Visby-class corvettes met and shadowed it in coordination with NATO partners. The mission was described as routine. What was visible was controlled. What was invisible was not discussed. Open sources do not confirm Swedish submarines conducting specific public hunts. That is not how undersea deterrence works. The power of a submarine is not in being seen tracking a target. It is in forcing the other side to assume it might be there. An assumption changes planning, because naval strategy depends on confidence and detection. If you can reliably track opposing submarines, you can allocate escorts efficiently. You can move surface ships with calculated risk. You can sortie from port with structured protection layers. But if you cannot confidently locate a hostile submarine, you must assume its presence. And assuming presence forces caution. That is the pressure point. Sweden's submarines are not large in number. They do not need to be. The Baltic is confined, shipping lanes are narrow, naval choke points are predictable, port exits are limited. In a crisis, a small number of extremely quiet submarines positioned correctly can hold disproportionate leverage, not because they guarantee destruction, because they impose uncertainty. Uncertainty is expensive. In confined seas, risk compounds fast. Now layer that into today's Baltic environment. Russia's so-called shadow fleet of oil tankers operates heavily in the region, attempting to circumvent sanctions. Swedish Coast Guard and naval forces have increased monitoring activity. By mid-2025, Sweden tightened inspection rules for shadow fleet vessels transiting its waters and economic zone. Swedish officials have reported armed personnel aboard some of these ships. Surface patrols monitor, air assets surveil. NATO exercises increasingly include Baltic undersea infrastructure defense scenarios. Exercise playbook Merlin 25 practice submarine detection and protection of critical seabed cables and pipelines. The Baltic has become an undersea infrastructure battlefield in waiting, and infrastructure warfare is not loud. It is silent, it is strategic, it is deniable. The A-26 design includes a multi-mission portal, enabling deployment of unmanned underwater systems and specialized payloads. Public doctrine frames this around infrastructure protection, reconnaissance, and seabed awareness. Protection is the official language, and protection only exists where vulnerability does. From Moscow's perspective, vulnerability expands as NATO control of the Baltic coastline consolidates. Kaliningrad sits geographically exposed. St. Petersburg lies within reach of layered NATO maritime and air presence. Russian Baltic Fleet movements must transit increasingly monitored corridors. And below those corridors, Swedish submarines operate in a sea designed for them. The Baltic used to be about fleet strength. Now, it is about who can disappear longer. And Sweden built its undersea force around disappearing. That is the shift, not dominance, just the removal of certainty. And when a navy loses certainty about where hostile submarines are operating, every movement becomes heavier, every escort grows thicker, every sortie grows slower, every calculation grows more conservative. And that forces Moscow to plan for risk it cannot measure. That is the beginning of strategic compression. And that compression is happening quietly, below the surface. Uncertainty by itself is uncomfortable, but in naval warfare, uncertainty becomes structure. Because fleets don't move on instinct, they move on confidence. Confidence in sonar coverage, confidence in escort layers, confidence in knowing what is not there. Sweden's submarines attack that confidence, not by firing, by existing. The Baltic Sea is not the Atlantic. It is confined, it is busy, it is noisy in ways that complicate clean detection. Layered salinity shifts distort sound propagation. Merchant shipping creates constant acoustic clutter. Fishing traffic, ferries, and port activity blur the undersea picture. And inside that environment, a small, quiet diesel-electric submarine with air-independent propulsion does not need deep water to hide. It needs complexity. That is what the Baltic offers. Now zoom into crisis logic. If Russia intends to move surface units from Kaliningrad into broader Baltic operations, it must assume NATO monitoring. That assumption already exists. But add another layer. It must assume Swedish submarines may already be positioned along likely transit routes. Not because they are confirmed there, because they cannot be ruled out. That distinction matters. If a commander cannot confidently eliminate the possibility of submarine presence, escort requirements increase. Anti-submarine warfare assets must spread wider. Helicopter cycles lengthen. Surface ships reduce speed to improve sonar performance. Operational tempo slows, and slowing tempo in a confined sea reduces flexibility. Now scale that beyond one sortie. If Russian planners model Baltic conflict scenarios, they must account for Swedish boats operating alongside German, Polish, and potentially other NATO submarines. They must assume shared intelligence integration, shared maritime awareness, shared crisis positioning. Sweden's NATO membership changes this from a national variable into an alliance variable. The Baltic is no longer a space where Russia deals with fragmented coastal actors. It is a networked perimeter. Almost the entire coastline is aligned, except Kaliningrad, except St. Petersburg. Geography did not change. Political alignment did. And undersea denial multiplies when coastline alignment consolidates. Now consider infrastructure. The Baltic carries power cables, data lines, pipelines, and shipping arteries that connect Northern Europe. Recent years have shown how sensitive undersea infrastructure can be. Exercises like Playbook Merlin 25 reflected recognition that undersea cables and energy lines are strategic pressure points. Sweden's submarine fleet, particularly the upcoming A-26 class, is designed with multi-mission capability. The multi-mission portal allows deployment of divers and unmanned underwater vehicles. Public doctrine emphasizes reconnaissance, seabed awareness, and infrastructure protection. And presence beneath the surface is inherently ambiguous. For Russia, this creates layered uncertainty. If a crisis escalates, Russian Baltic Fleet commanders don't get the luxury of clean maps. They have to assume Swedish submarines could already be positioned along likely transit routes out of Kaliningrad. They have to assume those same boats might be sitting near undersea infrastructure nodes. And they have to assume those submarines aren't operating alone, but plugged into NATO's wider situational awareness network. Not because any of that is confirmed in a specific grid square, because none of it can be confidently ruled out. And here is where consequence sharpens. When a submarine cannot be confidently tracked, the burden shifts. You must allocate more assets to anti-submarine patrols. You must accept that some movements carry unverified risk. You must assume that any unescorted vessel is vulnerable in a narrow sea that compounds quickly, because the Baltic does not allow infinite maneuver. Shipping lanes are constrained, transit corridors are predictable, port exits are few. Sweden's boats are not required to dominate the entire sea. They only need to complicate critical corridors. That is sea denial, not sea control. Sea denial is cheaper, and in confined waters, sea denial can be strategically decisive without large numbers. Now layer in recent operational realities. Sweden has publicly shadowed Russian naval movements with surface ships and aircraft. Swedish officials state Russian submarine contacts are frequent. Sweden has increased monitoring of shadow fleet tankers operating in Baltic waters. Armed guards have reportedly been present on some of these vessels. What is visible is structured surveillance. What is not visible is the undersea picture. And absence of visibility does not mean absence of activity, it means classification. From Moscow's perspective, the worst-case planning scenario must assume that Swedish submarines are integrated into NATO crisis response cycles. That means early positioning, silent monitoring, rapid escalation options, not as an offensive spectacle, but as a contingency. And contingency planning changes posture, because if you assume Swedish submarines are present but cannot confirm their location, you cannot plan aggressive movement with clean margins. Margins shrink. When margins shrink, exposure costs rise. More escorts, slower movement, tighter margins, and compounding pressure changes balance. Not dramatically, not overnight, but structurally. Now imagine a limited Baltic crisis scenario. Russia attempts to signal strength by increasing Baltic Fleet activity. Sweden, now inside NATO, does not need public escalation. Submarines deploy quietly. No press release, no footage, just presence. Russian planners must model that presence. They must assume at least one Swedish boat could be positioned along likely movement corridors. They must assume torpedo threat. They must assume mine deployment risk. They must assume undersea monitoring of their infrastructure. That assumption forces conservative movement, and conservative movement in a contested sea reduces initiative. Initiative is everything in confined waters. Now zoom out. This isn't just about submarine acoustics, it's about control. For decades, Russia's Baltic Fleet operated under a structural assumption. The sea was constrained but manageable. NATO was present but fragmented. Sweden was capable but neutral. Neutral Sweden created space. That space is gone. Sweden joining NATO didn't change the water. It changed the alignment around it. Now almost the entire Baltic coastline is NATO territory. From Norway to Denmark, across Germany, Poland, the Baltic states, Finland, and Sweden at the center, the perimeter is consolidated. In a confined sea, alignment compresses balance. Add the undersea layer, surface ships can be tracked, aircraft can be identified, missile systems can be mapped, submarines cannot be confirmed absent without proof, and proof is expensive. If Russia cannot establish confident undersea awareness, it cannot move with freedom. And if it cannot move freely, its ability to project strength becomes conditional. That's the shift. Sweden submarines don't need dominance. They need to make Russian control assumptions unreliable. Consider Kaliningrad, an exposed exclave dependent on narrow corridors. If those corridors are even potentially denied, planning becomes risk-heavy. Consider St. Petersburg, a naval and political hub. If anti-submarine resources must be concentrated near home waters, outward flexibility shrinks, not dramatically, but cumulatively. In crisis, NATO doesn't need spectacle. Quiet positioning is enough. If Russia cannot locate Swedish submarines, it must assume they are already positioned along transit routes or near critical infrastructure. That assumption compresses timelines. Compressed timelines increase pressure. pressure increases miscalculation risk. The Baltic is becoming less permissive for Russia, not through escalation but through integration. Small platforms, shallow water, networked denial. In deep oceans, numbers dominate. In confined seas, positioning dominates. Sweden understands this terrain. That expertise is now embedded inside NATO's structure. And when undersea denial becomes networked, margins narrow. Narrow margins don't collapse balance overnight. They introduce constraint. Constraint slows initiative. Lost initiative in confined waters reshapes power. No explosion, no headline moment, just accumulating pressure. Inside a Swedish submarine, none of this feels strategic. It's sonar returns, battery management, silent maneuver. But invisibility is power. If Russia does not know where Sweden's submarines are, it must assume they are already where it least wants them to be. And that assumption alone changes how the Baltic is planned, quietly, structurally, before a single torpedo is armed.